What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the EP by SwizZz Sessions. This came out in the spring of 2020, right around the time when the pandemic first happened. And this is kind of an interesting project just because SwizZz does not typically drop projects. He's mostly kind of a singles artist, but he does have a couple of projects that I've reviewed, one of which is the Haywire mixtape with Hobson, and then the other one was his solo mixtape, and the only other project he's really done, which is just Good Morning Swizzle, both of which I reviewed back in 2016. So Sessions is kind of a different project. It's not so much different from SwizZ's typical style, but it's just kind of an oddball release just because Funk Volume, which was SwizZ's home with Hobson back in the day, kind of dissipated, and SwizZ was kind of just in limbo for a lot of the time and did really not much else besides drop these kind of spare singles and stuff like that. So this is just kind of, it says on Wikipedia that Sessions was just kind of self-released, wasn't really on a label. It doesn't have a CD packaging. I think you can get it digitally, but it's only 3 songs, and it is on streaming services like Spotify, but it's just kind of like, this is about as close as we're probably going to get for the most part to actually getting like a body of work from SwizZz. I would definitely like to see a lot more of these, a series of these type things to really come out, maybe with like 4 or 5 or 6 songs on here, because I do feel like SwizZz is a talented rapper and he has a good niche for himself in the music that he does, because he typically makes like underground litty horrorcore type stuff. He's kind of like a cousin of Hobson in a lot of ways. It's not quite as lyrical as Hobson, but definitely kind of in the same context, in the same vein as Hobson. It is really too bad that we just never got to see that expressed in like bodies of work to where you could actually judge some of those Paramount kind of things. But I do feel like at least the very small taste of what happened in Sessions was interesting enough to kind of showcase that SwizZz does still have the talent even after leaving Funk Volume. But I don't know if we'll ever get another project from him, and just kind of the context about that. So yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing about it. It's just a distant and kind of obscure kind of project for the most part. Like I said, I would like to see this come out on CD, but it looks like it's basically just kind of one of those ones that probably for the most part I'd say the vast majority of SwizZz fans probably don't even know about, just because I don't know how many of his fans boiled over once he abandoned Funk Volume and that label kind of imploded and stuff. But to talk about these songs, the 3 songs on here, So there are 2 songs out of 3 I recommend. Basically, the 2 songs I recommend to you would be How Long and This Far. The 2 songs I would recommend to you would be How Long and This Far, and the song I wouldn't would just be By My Side. But to talk about the songs I do recommend, so I feel like How Long is kind of typical SwizZz. This is like vintage SwizZz right here. This is the sort of stuff that has a really haunting and kind of eloquent somber piano beat in here, but it's kind of commercial in a sense. I like the fact that SwizZz was trying to be commercial on this project and try to do some stuff that tried to crack him out of like his underground context a little bit. I mean, he didn't make a huge pass at trying to be more mainstream, but at least the production on here felt like something that could actually be kind of more expressed outside of just like the normal window. And that's just something I definitely saw in How Long, because this one did kind of feel like a haunting, almost horrorcore kind of beat, but it was also kind of commercial. I just really liked how somber it was and kind of foreboding. And it kind of has like the sort of ruminating stuff that Hobson and Tech Nine and NF and Dax kind of do, and Eminem even. It's interesting just to see that SwizZz is kind of good at that sort of stuff, because it's been a while since I've listened to a SwizZz project. So I don't really know his music that well, just because I don't really listen to spare singles. But it is interesting just to be able to see that SwizZz is a pretty good cat at ruminating and that type of stuff. Like another good hit for SwizZz is This Far, which is basically like a nice morning and blue collar kind of song. This is definitely one that reminds me of a lot more commercial. So this one kind of takes SwizZz out of his normal field, and this is not something that's horrorcore underground sounding. This really kind of comes off as like workaday kind of commercial, typical pop rap kind of stuff. It's just interesting to kind of get SwizZz on like some pop rap kind of elements, typical of like 2016, 2018, 2020 productions in rap music from a commercial sense. Sort of stuff that MGK would do, or Post Malone, or someone like them, or G-Eazy, or just some rappers who were kind of pop rap that kind of did trap but were not quite. This isn't really a trap album, but it does have some nice context where I definitely feel like This Far is definitely a nice pop rap kind of song. And this even has a nice hook from Willie C's Green, who kind of gives it like that kind of like workaday kind of coffee shop and kind of more blue collar type everyday workaday kind of feel towards it. So it's just nice to kind of get that one. That's 2 for 2 for SwizZz. But the third and final song, By My Side, I didn't really enjoy that much. I mean, this one's kind of a relationship song and a workaday one at that, but I just didn't really like the plain beat on here. I mean, this one just kind of felt like every day. I mean, the thing I like about SwizZz on this project is he really kind of converts to blue collar and kind of workaday type rap music, which is interesting for him because he was raised on underground and kind of more horrorcore type stuff, the stuff that was right out of Hobson's field. But it's just interesting to kind of get this one. I mean, it's a really kind of just bluesy, kind of workaday, kind of New York almost sounding like big city, Philadelphia type place type tune, but yeah, it's just a real kind of big city, Philadelphia, New York type tune, but I just couldn't really get into that one as much. I felt like it's pretty, I mean, it might kind of work in some cases, but I kind of miss like the old SwizZz on here. I kind of felt like that was something. It's just kind of, I suppose I could give By My Side kind of as like an almost song because the more I listen to it, the more I kind of like the pedestrian kind of production, but it just is very pedestrian and it's just so workaday about it. It's just very out of like SwizZ's typical element, which is just surprising just because normally he shines through with like these kind of more songs like he did on the first song, How Long, and just kind of the more horrorcore and kind of gloomy and kind of somber type tunes on here. But I really feel like there should have been a fourth, fifth, and even sixth song on here. I just kind of feel like it's just so lackadaisical. It's just a little bit more lackadaisical and too down to earth than what I would have expected from SwizZz. And I just would kind of have to say that it's pedestrian. It's definitely a pedestrian type tune, definitely kind of a city kind of pedestrian type tune from SwizZz. But these are just some new tricks that he tries that make me miss his old bag of tricks more so than the stuff that he's trying now. But it's a decent song. It's definitely a decent bop. So I could say in an avid sense, I do like all three of these songs, even if By My Side is kind of an almost song for the most part. But so I'm going to go ahead and score this album. So I would say this album, just because of a number of things about it, I'm going to give this EP a 7.25 out of 10. I feel like that's decent enough just because at least two of the songs I really felt like were pretty thorough hits. But I mean, like I said, By My Side being an almost song, but just there's a number of complaints about this project. For one thing, it's not available on CD. For another, it's too short. And for a third, there's not really like classic vintage SwizZz on here. And I just kind of feel like it's just kind of an interim project that kind of felt like a nice lapse of him just to be able to see what he's kind of up to. But there's just not really much for like old fans of his style. And I think that that's kind of the context about it, is it just kind of leaves you more hungry than what you might expect. And it's really, I just cannot, even to this day, I cannot figure out why SwizZz is so like adverse to putting out bodies of work and having people kind of become fans of his collective of works. And it's just kind of, I just feel like it's very unorganized and almost unprofessional to not have those kind of things more assorted better. But for what it is, I mean, he is a pretty quality musician when he makes songs, but it's just too bad that you can't get these on like something that's actually this that has a home body of work. It just would make more sense for him to be a musician with like classics in terms of like projects that he actually does. But so 7.25 out of 10. I do actually enjoy this project. It's just different from the typical Valve that he's usually into. In terms of the social score, I would go ahead and say, like, I guess I would give it a 6 out of 10 because I feel like This Far is not quite as social, but I do feel like How Long and By My Side are kind of like more of like the city type tunes, but there's not really a club song on here. There's just not a lot of flashiness, and it just feels rather restricted and controlled and just overall kind of in a refrained kind of atmosphere that just kind of makes you wonder why SwizZz didn't really cut loose and kind of pack this with a little bit more. It's just odd the way his, genetic makeup kind of goes in terms of putting out music. It just is very left field for most typical musicians. That's just kind of the concept. So in terms of the future, like I said, this is pretty much SwizZ's only other project apart from Good Morning Swizzle and then the Haywire mixtape. But it's just interesting kind of see that there's actually some good stuff on here. It just is too bad that we don't get vintage Swizz and stuff. But yeah, it's some decent stuff.